Howdy my totally always Tubular gamers, we're back with you guessed it, another video. Thanks for coming back to the channel. Tell me if you've never heard this one before. Sonic the Hedgehog and 3D have only ever gone incredibly well together. It's only been a smashing success. From that first game to the latest, it's been nothing but perfect. I told you to tell me if you hadn't heard that one before. I'm also not exactly speaking facts here. No, Sonic has had a very long, complicated history with 3D games, and plenty of people have talked about this for hours and hours and hours. It's a tale as old as time.
Sonic has had a rough transition to 3D.
So yeah, Sonic had one hell of a hard time making the proper jump into the third dimension.
Sonic had a rough transition into 3D.
Only Sonic the Hedgehog has had a rough history in 3D ever since he made the jump with Sonic Adventure.
And so today that's not what I'm going to be doing. I'm actually going to be ranking every single 3D Sonic game from worst to best. I've been a lifelong fan of the Blue Blur. I've played every 3D title and I'm going to be stacking them all up against each other. I'm going to be giving each one of them a review. I do actually have quite a bit to say about every single one of these games, so this is going to be a long one. So get your popcorn, get your beef jerky, start the car up, start going to sleep, whatever you need to be comfortable to listen or watch this video. I got timestamps so you hopefully don't lose your place. We're talking all the 3D Sonic games, from Sonic 3D Blast all the way to Sonic X Shadow Generations. I'll be comparing, contrasting, sharing my thoughts, memories, feelings, etc. Seeing where these games excel, maybe where they fall short, and which ones are even actually worth playing, especially nowadays. As per usual, I won't be looking at any mobile titles, so no Sonic Dream Team, and I do want to give a special shout out to Sonic Lost World on 3DS. I don't really have much experience with that one. Now then, with the series as beloved and hated as Sonic the Hedgehog, I'm sure everybody's going to have differing opinions when it comes to the 3D games and their quality, so let me know down below if you agree, if you disagree, how much you really disagree with me, or whatever it is down below that you want to see me rank next. And hey, as always, please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly, and I mean truly, greatly appreciated. Like, seriously. Thank you all so very much. I don't have a team or anybody helping me or anything. I know this is a pretty big ranking, so all your support, it is greatly appreciated. With all that said, let's get to the rankings. What's the worst 3D Sonic game? And so here we have Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, which came out for the Wii U in 2014. This has gone down to be not only maybe the worst Sonic game of all time, but one of the worst games of the 2010s. So this game, as the title implies, is part of the Sonic Boom sub-series. This would actually be the start of the sub-series, where there would be a few games and a few seasons of a TV show. And all I will say is that this is the very worst thing to come from the Sonic Boom sub-series, and they really didn't start off on a good foot. This is just one of those games where it feels like they got nearly every single thing wrong. So the story is about Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, who go up against this new antagonist known as Lyric after Sonic accidentally wakes his ass up. And I'll just keep things brief here. Anything to do with the story, characters, dialogue, writing, world building, anything to do with the general plot, it's just terrible in this game. There is very little to no redeeming qualities when it comes to the story or its characters or the general writing of this game. The game is also aggressively unfunny with some very dated memes to the point where it's just cringe. Something else I'll immediately call out is I don't like the character designs. Never have, never will. Especially Knuckles. I always thought he just looked kind of weird, and speaking of looking, let's take a look at the presentation here. Yeah, this isn't a great looking game. It was a Wii U game in 2014, and I'm not expecting Rise Son of Rome graphics, which funny enough runs on the same engine as this game, but it's just not a great looking game. Like, the character models, they're okay, you know, outside of the general design. The animation is not awful, but the environments just don't look all that good, and then the frame rate is horrid in this game. It is just kind of an abomination. The game chugs like crazy. It rarely ever runs at a steady frame rate, and it was just a really choppy experience. This game was just very unpolished when it came to the visuals and presentation in general. At least the music's pretty decent. When it comes to the gameplay, yeah, lacking polish is the least of this game's issues. The game doesn't really play much like any other Sonic the Hedgehog game. Rather than going fast and platforming, it plays much more like an action-adventure game. You can play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, and they all control decently different, but they all have one thing in common, that they don't control very well to begin with. The controls in this game just feel really sloppy, imprecise, and it never felt like I had a great handle on the feel of this game. There are a few different gameplay segments. There are some parts where where it tries to be more like other Sonic games where it's fast-paced and there's platforming, but the level design isn't anything special, and it made me wish I was playing literally any other 3D Sonic game. There are these bigger, more open areas where it's all about exploration and solving basic puzzles and using your character's abilities, and these, yeah, I don't really care for this. This is just kind of dull. I didn't have really any fun with this, and you get into quite a bit of combat, and really that's the last thing to bring up with this game. There is a lot of combat. It's not quick and easy like plenty of other Sonic games. No, they try to make it more involved here, and it's just not very good. Not only does it not feel well, it doesn't flow well, it's not nice, it's certainly not fun, and it just felt like a chore the entire time. This entire game just feels like a chore. The combat in this game is just kinda dreadful. It becomes super tedious, it's incredibly easy, it doesn't ever try to challenge you, it doesn't even try to ever do anything different. It's just this boring slog. And they even throw a few bosses in there, but the combat, there's just nothing really good about it. I really struggle to find like anything good about this gameplay. They try to add a little extra depth. Each character does have their own unique abilities, and you will need to switch between them in order to get through the game. You can even upgrade them by finding this scrap metal, but it really just doesn't add anything to the game. This really is just such an unfun experience that I had trouble playing even more than like an hour or two of it. I played it back when it came out at a friend's house he was really excited for, and I guess we were just fucking fools because I thought it could have been half decent, but no. What you have here is one of the worst video games I've ever played. The gameplay is beyond tedious, repetitive, there's very few good things about it, it's incredibly buggy, the presentation's terrible, the writing is an insult to Sonic the Hedgehog, and this game in general is just kind of an insult to humankind. Sega didn't send out review codes because they knew this game was going to tank, and it absolutely did tank. I cannot recommend a single human being on this planet, not even my worst enemy, go check this game out. It's just awful. So here we have Sonic 3D Blast, which released for the Genesis and the Sega Saturn, and I'll immediately say this game, it certainly is not a blast. This was like the first Sonic game I ever played, and well, that was a fucking mistake. Outside of the music, this game barely does anything right. I'd rather play it over Rise of Lyric, but that really isn't saying much. I'd rather pay some bills, eat some cereal, or better yet, just take a nap instead of playing Rise of Lyric. So Sonic 3D Blast setup isn't exactly anything special. It sees him going to Flicky Island and trying to rescue the animals from Eggman. Yeah, it's about as basic as it gets. But this time he's doing it in the third dimension. This was Sonic's first attempt at a 3D game, and yeah, it's really awkward. The game is played from this like top-down perspective, where yes, you are moving around in a 3D space and you are platforming, but man, I struggle to call this game a 3D platformer. I will just say immediately, this is one of the most awkward video games I've ever played. The controls feel like dog shit. They're super sensitive, but at the same time they're incredibly stiff and awkward. It's wildly imprecise. It just never feels good. You never get any kind of speed or sense of speed. Platforming and figuring out exactly where you're going to land can just kind of be a nightmare. And it doesn't matter how many times I've come back to this game, it's never even felt close to good. Shoot, it's never even felt far away from bad. It's just awful, and it kind of ruins like the entire game. The controls and the feel and the platforming are just so terrible that it makes playing this game a struggle, a chore. It's difficult to play more than even a few minutes of this game. The level design isn't exactly helping things either. This game isn't a straight simple A to B platformer. You're dropped into these kind of open areas and you have to find the flickies, and you have to rescue enough of them to progress on to the next section where you do the exact same thing over and over until you finally fight a boss. And so what this leads you to doing is combing every single nook and cranny of these levels to make sure you don't miss the birds so you don't have to backtrack, and it's just not fun. The level design is not intuitive. It feels all over the place. Some of these levels start getting really big, especially as you get further in the game. It becomes incredibly tedious. You never get to go past a slight jog, and they're just kind of a mess. There isn't a single good level in this game, and visually it's just kind of an abomination. There's so much visual noise, like it's a straight clusterfuck. I don't know where to go next. I don't know where I can even go, and it only gets worse the more you play this game. The longer you'll play this game, the more and more you'll dislike it. There are special stages which are nothing special. There's boss fights, and thanks to the isometric viewpoint, landing on enemies is stupidly difficult, and this game just doesn't really feel like a Sonic game. Through and through, it barely feels like a Sonic game. Yeah, Sonic and Eggman are in it, but it doesn't play anything like a Sonic game, and it's just a terrible game in its own right. It's like a weird Frankenstein monster of like a concept of a 3D game with Sonic thrown in. You know, I'm not even going to entertain that idea. It's just a terrible game. I don't recommend this game to anybody. I think this game is actually often overlooked when people are talking about the worst Sonic games of all time. This game is almost as bad as it gets. Outside of the soundtrack, especially the Saturn version, it is incredible. It is so good. I love the music from this game, but I could not play another minute of this game unless you were going to ban me from Wendy's for life or something drastic like that. Like, it sucked then, and it's going to suck forever. So here we have Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 for the PS3 and 360, everyone's favorite Sonic game. This game has been talked to death for many years now, and it's widely considered to be one of the worst Sonic games of them all. And you know what? I concur. I'm not one of those contrarians who's like, actually the game is pretty decent, it's better than you remember. No, it's actually as bad as I remember it being. I thought it was terrible back in the 2000s, and I think it's just as bad now. The game could have been great, there's a ton of ambition here, and there's a lot of missed potential, but instead of looking at what we could have, I'm going to look at what Sega gave us and what they gave us. It's one of the most infamous games of all time. And here we are not far from 20 years later, and I feel like it just did low-key irreparable damage to Sonic's brand in general. Where to even start with this game? I guess we can start with the story. It's easily the most convoluted and all over the place Sonic story of them all, where it's about Sonic rescuing this human princess named Elise going up against Eggman, but Shadow's also here, this other evil being known as Mephiles shows up, then there's Silver the Hedgehog from the future, and he thinks Sonic is going to bring the destruction of the world, but what the fuck does he know? He looks like a marijuana leaf and acts like a dumbass stoner the entire game anyway. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I don't have all day to unpack this shit because there really is a lot of shit. Just know that it's bad. It's not very good. And it really is as bad as everyone says it is. The writing, the characters, the story, the plot twist, the ending, the last like 20 minutes of the game, it's all bad. I will say though, there are some parts where the game actually does like a full 180 and it becomes so bad that it's actually good, and it's very funny and quite entertaining.
Chaos control!
But for the most part, it's laughably bad and one of the biggest blemishes ever to the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, and I could say the same thing about actually playing this game. This game was pretty ambitious and tried to be more like Sonic Adventure, where you play as a bunch of different characters. You play as 9 different characters in this game, and I'm not going to sit here and explain every single one to you. Just know that they all really suffer from the same issues, some just more than others. The controls are just terrible across the board. No matter which character you're playing as, they're super stiff, imprecise, and at times they feel ultra sensitive. I just never got a good grasp of any character in this game. The camera is also one of the worst cameras of any 3D game. Like, it really is bad. The level design is also incredibly dull for basically everybody but Sonic. When you're Sonic, it's not that bad, but everyone else, it's pretty terrible, especially Silver. Silver really gets the worst of it in this game. His gameplay is easily the worst. He has the horrible ball level, and he's easily the worst boss fight in the whole game. The boss fights are a joke in this game. Whenever combat does show up, it's pretty terrible. And yeah, while this game does have a decent amount of variety, since there are so many different characters to play as and they all have slightly different gameplay styles, but it doesn't really matter if none of them are fun to play as. Literally not a single one. Sure, some of them are better than others, but I wouldn't say any of these characters are, good. The pacing is also horrible in this game. The load times ruin the pacing for the entire game. They just kind of ruin everything. These might be the worst load times of like any video game. Sure, they aren't the longest load times. They're not Grand Theft Auto 5 long, but they're everywhere. In between every cutscene, every time you talk to somebody, when you start up a level, like they are everywhere in this game. To the point that it just kind of wrecks the entire experience. And if that's not wrecking it, it'll disrupt it even further. All of the glitches, the bugs, and just how unpolished this game is. It's notoriously unpolished and buggy. This game really was just a chore to finish. I remember it took a lot out of me to beat this game for the first time, and I've never beat it since, and honestly I could go the rest of my life without playing it again, and that would be fine with me. At least the graphics for the time weren't terrible, some of the environments look decent, and the soundtrack is pretty awesome. Like, the soundtrack is really good in 06, I will not deny that. But really, everything else from this game is just better left forgotten. It's not a good game, and I wouldn't even tell someone to go play it as like a sick joke or if they were trying to play a bad game on purpose. Like, it's just not worth anybody's time, except that soundtrack. Go listen to that. The rest of the game, yeah, just forget it even exists. And here we have Sonic and the Secret Rings, which released for the Wii in 2007. I actually remember getting this game back when it came out. I couldn't have been more than like 10. But I was just really excited that there was a new Sonic game for the console. I had just gotten the Nintendo Wii, and I actually did like the game as a kid. I remember not loving it, but for the most part I enjoyed it. Then I came back to this game as a teenager, and then as an adult, and went, man, what the hell was I thinking? So this game was part of a Sonic sub-series that was 2 games known as the Sonic Storybook series, and it would be based off of Arabian Nights. And it saw our blue boy getting sucked into the world of Arabian Nights and taking on this evil genie. I never really cared much for the story. Like, whether I was a kid or an adult, I really just had a hard time feeling anything but indifference for what was going on. Yeah, other Sonic characters show up as, like, famous Arabian Night characters, but I just couldn't care less. It's probably one of the most consistent thoughts I've had about this game from playing it as a child all the way till now. That, or that the music is incredible. Seriously, the music in Sonic and the Secret Rings is so good. 7 Rings in Hand might be like my favorite Sonic song of them all, and that really is saying something. The music is hands down the best aspect of this entire game. It's a hell of a lot better than actually playing it. Maybe it's because this game came out during the motion control craze, but I just have such a hard time imagining myself actually enjoying this gameplay at all. So there's a few key things to know about Sonic and the Secret Rings. The entire game takes place on rails, where Sonic will go on a predetermined path forward, kind of like Crash Bandicoot, but much, much worse. Moving backwards is really something you're not going to be doing here. The game also uses a mission structure. It isn't just level to level. You actually have to do a bunch of missions. Sometimes you're collecting things, sometimes it is just point A to B, but a lot of the time you find yourself replaying areas over and over to do other objectives or other platforming challenges. And let's talk about the platforming. It's very different from like any other Sonic game, or even most 3D platformers. For whatever reason, Sonic has to like charge his jump. If you just tap the jump button, he does this tiny shitty little jump. You have to like hold it down, let him charge for a second, let him hold in that fart, and then he can actually jump a normal distance, and it just feels super awkward and stilted. And speaking of awkward and stilted, let's get to the elephant in the room, the motion controls. I'll just be blunt about it, the motion controls kind of ruin this entire game, especially if you're coming back to it in current day. So Sega thought it would be a good idea if you control Sonic like a car. You have to hold the Wii Remote sideways, tilting left and right to make Sonic move left and right. You have to shake the Wii Remote, and all of this just goes about as bad as you would expect. When turning left and right is a pain in the ass and is incredibly unresponsive, you know you're not in for a good time. The controls are, simply put, just wildly unresponsive. They're just incredibly inaccurate, and a 3D platformer should not be controlled like this. The bad controls, poor feel, and just awkward jumping just kind of ruin this entire experience. If the controls weren't as bad as they were, I would say this was a just very mediocre game, but thanks to the controls, it goes from mediocre to just plain bad. But even if the controls weren't ass, this game really wouldn't have all that much going for it. The level design is very basic, it's simplistic, it never really does anything you haven't seen before in a platformer, and it's clear they kept things simple for the motion controls. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it utilizes a mission structure, and you end up playing through the same areas over and over, and some of these objectives are just plain obnoxious. Like when you have to get the dinosaur eggs, you can just fuck right off with that mission. They try to give Sonic these other abilities as you play through the game, these other skills. I don't know why I said it like that, it sounds like Skittles. These skills you get, but this doesn't really shake things up or make the game any, better. Funny enough, this game actually had a multiplayer mode that was kind of like Mario Party, but these minigames, gosh, you think the main game had poor controls? You ain't seen these minigames. The world is not ready for these minigames all these years later, and I'm not going to talk about them. So needless to say, this is one of Sonic's weaker 3D experiences. While it isn't unbelievably terrible, I absolutely cannot recommend this game. Like most Sonic games, I recommend the soundtrack and never actually trying the game. But here we are 15 plus years later, and we still haven't figured out who's gonna rock the place. So here we have Sonic Forces, which released in 2017. I know this game has had a pretty mixed reception really from the moment it released, but even as a die-hard Sonic fan, I've just never really been a fan of this game. It's not like this game is god-awful or has any major crippling issues, it just has a bunch of little things that really pile up to make this a very unremarkable experience. So the story starts out kind of dark actually, where Eggman finally beats Sonic thanks to his new lackey known as Infinite, and conquers most of the world, but all of Sonic's friends create a resistance group, and eventually Sonic busts out, joins them, along with this new character that you create known as the Rookie, and vows to stop Eggman and Infinite. After that, the story kind of reverts back to most Sonic stories and becomes rather lighthearted. The game even has plenty of moments that even made me chuckle.
None of this is good, Vector. That's why it's called war. Whoa, you gotta be kidding. That's just a special effect, right?
Despite that, I was never really big on this game's story. Like, Infinite's better than Mephiles, I can say that at least. But I really just had a hard time getting into this story and its characters, and by the end of it I was just kind of like, that just kind of happened. So the big gimmick, the big selling point of Sonic Forces was the original character you could create. You could customize an avatar, and I know people had been doing it on DeviantArt for years and years, but finally, you could have your own original character in a Sonic the Hedgehog video game that would interact with Sonic and be an integral part of the story. And while I think this was a great idea, I don't think it was executed all that well. The character customization is decent enough. Look, I'm not expecting like Neo 2 or Dragon's Dogma 2 character creator out here, but I think we could have used a few more options. At least we have the gamer hat, that'll always get a chuckle out of me. When it comes to actually playing this game, there are 3 different gameplay types. There is 3D Sonic, there is Classic Sonic who shows up for some reason, and then there's your customizable character. Modern Sonic very much uses the boost formula, where you're constantly boosting, moving forward, occasionally going off the beaten path, and sometimes even doing some 2D platforming. Classic Sonic is strictly just 2D platforming, and yeah, it's Classic Sonic. Things are easily the most interesting when you're playing as the Avatar. Here it's actually kind of more like Sonic Heroes, where you don't go super fast, but you have different abilities and you actually get to utilize these abilities for some different paths. And these are easily the best levels of Sonic Forces. I think my biggest issue with Sonic Forces outside of the length is easily the levels. Like, yeah, as modern Sonic, you actually do get to go pretty fast in a lot of these levels, but these levels just feel so bland, like you're on autopilot the whole time. You just hold the boost button down, you push up on the analog stick, and that's pretty much the entire level. There's not a ton of platforming. The overall design of these levels just feels very phoned in, basic, and it doesn't feel like this game introduces a single new thing. I thought a majority of modern Sonic's levels were just very forgettable. And then we have Classic Sonic. Classic Sonic, for whatever reason, just does not feel all that good to control. Like, he feels quite a bit worse than he did in Generations and feels way too stiff for my liking. And then we have his levels, and yeah, there's really just not a single good level here. Some of them are particularly bad, like Jungle Casino, but even at their very best, they're just very unremarkable. And then when you're actually playing as the Avatar, these levels, yeah, they're decent enough. They probably have the best level design of any of the characters. There actually is a bunch of different paths to take, and it doesn't feel like you're on autopilot the entire time. This ain't so bad. And yeah, nothing is particularly egregious here. The boss fights are fine. The gameplay is subpar. But I'm not out here going, this is the worst this and that. It's just not very good. The game is also incredibly short, like 3, maybe 3.5 hours long, and it's just one of those experiences where I played through the entire game and like a week later, I barely remember anything about it. It's one of the most forgettable Sonic games of them all, and I never really cared much for it. I don't even really care for the music. I know some people love the music of Sonic Forces, but it's pretty whatever to me. This is one game I would have a hard time recommending to even the most die-hard of Sonic the Hedgehog fans. So here we have Sonic and the Black Knight, which released for the Wii in 2009. This is the follow-up to Sonic and the Secret Rings and the second game in the Sonic Storybook series. And while I don't think it's a great game, it certainly is a big improvement on Secret Rings. So the story this time around sees Sonic being transported to the story of King Arthur by this wizard named Merlina, as they try to stop this corrupted Arthur known as the Black Knight. The story, while it is better than Secret Rings, I also just don't really care much about it. Other Sonic characters do show up here as other characters, and it's a bit more tolerable than the Secret Rings, but I really just had a hard time feeling anything when it came to this game's story or characters or general plot. So when it comes to actually playing this video game, it is pretty similar to Secret Rings in a few aspects. The game still is on rails, you're moving forward the entire time, and you really can only strafe left and right, and moving backwards isn't something you necessarily want to be doing. I will say immediately the controls and feel of this game are significantly better than Secret Rings because you use the nunchuck, which is an analog stick. And while this doesn't fix all of the game's control issues, at least moving left and right is way better than Secret Rings. So the big gimmick of this game is that Sonic actually uses a sword. Yeah, he's fighting fools left and right with a big ass sword, and it's about as goofy as it sounds. The combat in this game tries to be like a hack and slash, but it is very, and I mean very basic. This is where the motion controls come in, where you gotta waggle the Wii Remote to swing your sword, and what this ultimately comes down to is you just waggling pretty much 24/7 to swing that sword as you take out enemies and move forward. Pretty much everything to do with the combat is tied to waggling that Wii Remote, so you better get used to shake, shake, shake. Shake, 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 shake your Wii Remote. Yeah, it does get pretty tiresome. You do have the soul gauge like the previous game, but all those extra skills that really didn't do much are actually gone. Instead, you get to play as other characters. Yeah, you don't only play as Sonic, you can play as Knuckles, Shadow, and even Blaze the Cat, and they all play decently different from Sonic. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still doing shake, shake, shake. But at least there's some variety here. They have different moves, and they do feel, you know, even at least kinda different from Sonic, which is nice, because this gameplay can actually start to get pretty stale. The combat, like I said, is incredibly basic. You're always moving along a set path, and the game loves to just straight up bombard you with enemies. Like, there are just tons and tons of enemies on these paths, and all you gotta do is just shake that Wii Remote to take them all out, and by the end of it, it was getting pretty repetitive. At least waggling that Wii Remote was somewhat responsive. I'm not gonna act like the controls are great, and I much rather preferred, you know, just traditional controls, but it's passable enough here. The level design, pretty much the same thing. It's nothing terrible, it's nothing too drab and boring. And like Secret Rings, the game has a mission structure, so you end up replaying areas and sections kind of over and over. But at least it didn't wear me down like Secret Rings did. It really just wasn't anything special. I could say the same for the presentation as well. I mean, for 09 on the Wii, yeah, it looked alright. That frame rate though, it could be a little sussy, but it's nothing as bad as like 06 where there's just mega slowdown. And the soundtrack, yeah, it's pretty good in this game also. Not as good as Secret Rings in my opinion, but I quite like the music in Black Knight as well. Generally speaking, I think Black Knight gets a little bit of a bad rap. Yeah, it is kind of stupid, Sonic's using a sword, and the game is mad gimmicky, but I don't think it's this ridiculously unenjoyable experience that no one can have any fun with. I think there's plenty of fun to be had with Black Knight, and the motion controls don't hold it back too much. And I think most Sonic fans are going to enjoy this one, or at least enjoy aspects of it. And so here we have truly a fan favorite, Shadow the Hedgehog, which released in 2005. Now, I actually played this game back in the 2000s when it was still pretty new, and I remember as a kid, I thought it was the coolest shit ever. Shadow was so dark and edgy, he had guns, he was dead fucking serious, and he was uncovering his mysterious past. The game had an amazing color palette, black, gray, brown, and on occasion a shit-colored brown with a tint of red. Hey, I didn't say I was the smartest kid. Nowadays I look back and I just laugh at how edgy and serious this game is, and really as time passes on, the game just gets funnier and funnier. And maybe it's just because I have a ton of nostalgia for this game, but I don't think this game is as bad as a lot of people say it is. It's more in the mid-tier of 3D Sonic games. Now when it comes to this game's premise, characters, and general story, this shit is just redonkulous. It's about Shadow trying to uncover every single aspect of his past and take on these aliens known as the Black Arms. Yeah, all of a sudden an alien invasion happens, and then the player actually gets to choose whether or not Shadow wants to be a good guy and help Sonic and friends, or maybe even team up with the aliens and take over the world. The story is just so unbelievably stupid, convoluted, and low-key nonsensical that it goes from being pretty bad to actually pretty awesome. Like, this story and these cutscenes are wildly entertaining for all of the wrong reasons.
What? Goodbye, Doctor.
Like, if you go into this game expecting a really gritty, serious narrative, yeah, you're gonna be pretty disappointed. But if you take a step back and just kind of accept it for how stupid it is, I think you're gonna have a good time with a lot of these cutscenes, particularly the dialogue. Shadow's dialogue is just frankly ridiculous for a majority of the cutscenes.
Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald?
This game tries to take itself so seriously, and then it just does like the stupidest shit. For instance, there's one level where Black Doom tells Shadow that he needs to assassinate the President of the United States. You can't make this shit up. And I just can't help but laugh at it at this point. Maybe it's just a guilty pleasure, but I truly think this is one of those game stories, plots, whatever you want to call it, that is so bad, it becomes good. And I think it's pretty cool how you could actually decide whether or not you wanted Shadow to be a good guy or bad guy or something in between. It's a shame though that all of these are meaningless since there is a true canon ending to this game. Anyway, I've been going off about the dumbass story for a few minutes now. Long story short, this is edgy hedgy at its very best. Like, this really is one of the edgiest video games ever made, especially from a visual standpoint. There is only dark colors in this game, and I think it perfectly captures just how edgy the mid-2000s are. This is like Rip Skinny Jeans, the video game. At least graphically, I think the game was fine for the time. When it comes to actually playing the game, yes, let's talk about actually playing the video game. It is a 3D Sonic game. A majority of the levels see you moving from point A to B, doing plenty of platforming, going fast, and getting into combat. But there actually is some other objectives that show up in this game. See, Shadow can either be a good guy and help Sonic / the military that is still known as Gun, or he can help the Black Arms, the aliens. Or you can just ignore both of them and go straight for the goal ring. Depending on who you're helping, the objectives might change. If you're just going for the goal ring, it's as simple as that. But usually if you want to help Sonic or the military, you got to take out all of the Black Arms in the entire level. And if you want to help the Black Arms, you got to take out all of the military. And then sometimes they'll mix things up and be like, oh, if you want to help the good guys, you actually have to collect these secret discs. But it's never anything more complex than find and collect, defeat all of the enemies in a level, or just get to the goal ring. As for the actual levels themselves, they're pretty up and down. There are some levels that I genuinely think are actually pretty decent here, but there are some levels that are just fucking terrible. Like 100, 100, no cap, no kizzy, inspect weapon. Some of the levels in Shadow the Hedgehog really are some of the worst levels in any Sonic the Hedgehog game. But some levels are actually decently well done. Something that is kind of cool and unique to Shadow the Hedgehog is depending on who you side with, you'll take different routes. For instance, if you side with the Black Arms in the first level, Westopolis, you'll go to a completely different level than if you sided with Sonic or just ran to the goal ring. And you can actually greatly alter your path depending on who you side with, so at the very least you can usually avoid some of the pretty shitty levels. And then depending on who you side with at the very last minute will determine which ending you get. There are 10 different endings, and if you want to get the true canon final level with the real final boss, you have to see every single ending. So that means you have to play through the entire game 10 times. Yeah, the structure, it's pretty awful. There's no two ways about it. You shouldn't have to play through the game 10 times. Like, even with all these different paths and different levels and approaches you can take, you still have to play through Westopolis 10 fucking times. This shit is just ridiculous, and it's easily my biggest issue with the game. If you didn't have to play through it 10 times, maybe instead you only got to get like 5 or 6 of the endings, I think the pacing and just general structure of the game would be significantly better. But my issues don't stop there. The controls just aren't very good. Shadow is way too imprecise and slippery. He's just sliding around all over the place. It doesn't matter how many times I've come back to this game, I'm always just like, yep, the controls are really imprecise. And the combat, yeah, it's just not all that great. I'll finally talk about it. You get to use guns. This game tries to kind of be like a third-person shooter, but I'll be real, the shooting is not very good in this game. It's kind of hard to aim, and some weapons are just low-key useless. You can even get into vehicles, but these don't control all that well, and they're pretty slow. At its very best, the combat, it's okay, it's serviceable. Some of the weapons feel okay, but at its worst, it's just kind of a clunky mess. But it will never not be funny seeing Shadow run around with these giant guns. You can also do these punches and kicks, but it's about as useless as farting on them. And then, depending on which enemies you're defeating, you actually fill up 2 different Chaos bars. One of them is Chaos Blast, which is basically just a screen nuke, and the other is Chaos Control, where you fly forward through a level and it's much better. Both of which, though, don't really add a ton to the experience. The last thing I want to bring up, my last gripe, is that at least in gameplay, it doesn't really matter who you're siding with. For instance, if you're only taking on the military and helping the aliens, they will still attack you, and Black Doom will get mad at you for attacking the aliens, even though they're trying to kill you, and it's like, how is this intuitive? This just never really made any sense to me. Anyway, Shadow the Hedgehog, yeah, it's got plenty of issues, but I think it does have some merit, and all these years later, I still kinda like the game. Yeah, it might just be nostalgia and a guilty pleasure, but I don't think this game just totally falls apart into this broken mess. Could it have been a hell of a lot better? Absolutely, but damn it, it could have been so much worse. Either way, I think I can really only recommend this one to like the hardcore Sonic fans that haven't tried it. I can't imagine most people liking it, but if you love Sonic the Hedgehog or you want to see what Shadow's all about, then yeah, go ahead and try it, or at least listen to the music. Like every other Sonic game, the music is pretty good. And so here we have Sonic Lost World, which initially came out for the Wii U in 2013, but I've only ever played the PC version that came out 2 years later. I think Sonic Lost World is the prime example of like a mixed bag. When it comes to the story, it sees Sonic and Tails taking on this new alien tribe known as the Deadly Six, with their leader Zavok trying to siphon all of the world's energy from this lost hex, which is the game's setting. The story, it's okay. Like, it's pretty predictable and obvious how things are going to play out, but I don't think it's like terrible, and I think the Deadly Six are fine. Sega really loves Zavok though for some reason. At least the general writing and dialogue is pretty on brand for Sonic, and the game has plenty of humorous moments. It wasn't completely terrible, and I didn't feel utter indifference, so that's a good thing. When it comes to the gameplay, yeah, they mix up the Sonic formula yet again. Most of the levels have this tube-like design that kind of looks like Sonic Extreme or Mario Galaxy, with an ever-changing perspective, but you really are doing Sonic the Hedgehog things. You're collecting rings, you're going fast, you're defeating enemies, and bouncing off springs. This game actually does have a run button, which I always thought was an odd decision. You'll basically be holding this the entire time, but if you want some really precise movement, you can let go of it. But it's not the most annoying issue. The controls are actually pretty decent in Sonic Lost World, and the game still has an alright sense of speed. There's even plenty of 2D sections, and these are okay. There's also a bunch of grinding. I mean, every Sonic game is grinding, and these are acceptable. But to be 100 here and give you the lowdown, most of these levels are just okay. A lot of them are forgettable. And while they certainly look unique, especially thanks to the tube-like design, I feel like they don't really actually do all that many imaginative things, and I felt like a majority of the levels just kind of blended together. There's also a lot of do or die situations in Sonic Lost World where you need to make a snap reaction or quick judgment, otherwise you die, and these can always be kind of annoying. At the very least, the combat is very simple. You just jump on enemies or use the homing attack. There are bosses in this game, but yeah, they're not so great. Something else that I don't think is all that great is the parkour mechanic this game introduces, where Sonic can run along the wall like it's Titanfall or some of the futuristic Call of Duties, and this just isn't very good. It's wildly unresponsive. It feels like half the time it doesn't want to work or register that you're trying to do it, and I found myself dying over and over due to just how shoddy this entire mechanic is. At the very least though, they don't force you into it a majority of the time. But it's not a deal breaker or anything like that. Overall, I would say Sonic Lost World is a pretty average experience. It feels like for everything it gets right, it gets something wrong. The level design, it's alright, the controls are fine. The story's okay, I guess, and the presentation was pretty good for the time. The soundtrack is nice, and at the very least, the game could have been a lot worse, but it also could have been quite a bit better. The game at times kind of lacks an identity, and when you look at the overall experience, I would say Sonic Lost World is just kind of forgettable. Like, I played through it, I knew it was okay, but I couldn't really remember all that much about it until I looked at old footage of it, and then all of the memories started flooding back in. But yeah, it was just kind of one of those games that went in one ear out the other. It's still a decent game, and it's better than a lot of 3D Sonic games, but it certainly would be a bit of a hard sell. And here we have Sonic Heroes, which initially released in 2003. This was actually one of the first Sonic the Hedgehog experiences I ever had, and all these years later, I still think the game is pretty decent. It definitely has some issues, but I still find it relatively enjoyable, at least on the GameCube. When it comes to the story, it's about 4 different trios of Sonic characters taking on Eggman. There's Team Sonic, which is Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. Team Dark, which has Shadow, Newcomer, Omega, and Rouge the Bat. Team Rose, which has Amy, Big the Cat, and Cream the Rabbit, and then Team Chaotix, which has Espio the Chameleon, Vector the Crocodile, and Charmy Bee. And looking back, I gotta say it's pretty cool that they actually brought the Chaotix characters back from the Forgotten 32X game. And their setup actually isn't about them trying to take on Eggman, it's about doing these odd jobs for this mysterious person on a walkie-talkie as they try to get some money, honey. Yeah, when it comes to this game's story, it's pretty simple. It's nowhere near as complex as Adventure 1 and 2, and honestly, that's fine. It's just a lighthearted, good old time. And speaking of lighthearted, we have the presentation. Okay, that maybe wasn't the smoothest transition, but I do want to bring up this game's presentation. I love how Sonic Heroes looks all these years later. It's a good looking game from this era, and it really is like how I imagine a 3D Sonic game looking. It's incredibly colorful, like all of the bright colors just pop, all of the zones look incredibly different from each other, there's so much charm and personality. The character models and animation is pretty decent, and the frame rate was very smooth throughout. The music is also fantastic in Sonic Heroes. This has some of the best music of any 3D Sonic game. It's really good stuff. So all that is well and good, but let's actually talk about the game side of the video game. When it comes to playing Sonic Heroes, it is a 3D platformer, but it's got a unique twist on it. Since you are playing as trios the entire time, you can switch between any of the 3 characters, and each one of them falls into a certain archetype. There's your speed characters, who move the fastest, have a homing attack and a not spin dash. You have your power characters, who are still decently fast, but they have all these combos and attacks, and there is a decent amount of combat in this game. And then you have your flying characters, which are the slowest characters, but yeah, they can fly for a limited amount of time. And you can even kick your other team members and use them as projectile weapons. I'm sure that feels just great. And to get through these levels, you'll have to use all 3 of these character types, and oftentimes you'll get diverging paths depending on which character you're playing as. But that's not the case for every single level. When it comes to the level design, it's pretty typical 3D Sonic, where it's a very linear experience, where you get to actually go really fast, you fight enemies, there's different paths you can take, and there's a bunch of little gimmicks and set pieces for really every single level. This game does have quite a bit more combat than any other 3D Sonic game, since enemies are rocking health bars, but the power characters can really bring the heat, and you can actually do some serious damage with all of them. But I gotta say, when it comes to the general level design of Sonic Heroes, I think it's actually pretty good for the most part. A majority of these levels not only feel really different from each other, but they're just well designed. I like how many different paths there are. I like that for the most part you actually do get to go pretty fast. The combat isn't too annoying, and there's plenty of memorable moments, set pieces, and gimmicks thrown in here. Like, this game has some really genuinely good levels to it, and the boss fights aren't bad either. Most of them are okay. When you fight the other teams, it's not so great, but outside of those, I think the boss fights are actually good here. So then why isn't Sonic Heroes way higher on the list if I think it's actually a really good game? Well, it's not all great. Even as someone with a ton of nostalgia for this game, I can see that, yeah, it's got some issues. The controls in this game just aren't all that great. They're super, and I mean super slippery. You just fly all over the place whenever you're playing as a speed or power character. Like, the controls at times just feel hypersensitive, and I have flown off the side of a stage way too many times thanks to these just slippery controls. And it can really mess with the feel of this entire game. Like, even at its very best, the controls and feel are just okay, and they take a long time to get used to, but the control issues don't end there. I'll just immediately bring it up. The pinball physics are fucking terrible in Sonic Heroes. Like, what the fuck happened here? These are like the worst pinball physics of any Sonic game. And it just drags the casino levels down the shitter into the pipes. Like, the casino levels just straight up suck. And then the grinding, like, what happened here? The grinding should be great in this game. Rail Canyon should be an amazing level, but the grinding is crazy unresponsive. Half the time when you switch over to the next rail, you just fly off the side. And there really is no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes you're able to just jump on over to the rail next to you. Other times, yeah, you fly off and die. And so a lot of the time you end up just being the flying character just in case you do fly off the side and you can actually recover. And then don't get me started on the controls in these special stages. These are some of the worst special stages of any Sonic game. They control like utter bird shit, and you need all of the emeralds to get the final story segment. And speaking of getting the final story segment, let's talk about the game's pacing and progression. And if you don't get the emerald in the first like 30 seconds, just give up. You're never gonna get it. Kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to issues with Sonic Heroes. This game expects you to play through it 4 times in order to get the final story segment. You gotta play through it as all 4 of the teams, and the teams don't have unique levels or boss fights. There are 14 levels, and these 14 levels are the same for every single team. The only difference is where the goal ring is. Outside of Team Chaotix, where you actually have to collect stuff. More on them in just a second. When you play as Team Sonic, the goal ring is like 75 or 80% through the level. It's considered the normal difficulty. When you play as Team Dark, the goal ring is at the very end of the level, so you gotta play through everything. And when you play as Team Rose, the goal ring is at like the 50% mark. When you play as Team Chaotix though, yeah, you gotta find collectibles in these levels, and that can either take a few minutes or a long ass time. But either way, you gotta go through these levels 4 times. It doesn't matter how good these levels are, having to play through the exact same levels 4 times is just not very good. In a few different aspects, it absolutely wrecks the pacing. It makes the game feel incredibly repetitive, actually rather quickly, and it just makes the gameplay feel rather stale. The game overstays its welcome because you gotta play through it so many different times. It's like they're really just stretching the game out as long as they possibly could. When you play through the game once, you know, likely as Team Sonic, I think it's a great experience. The pacing's actually really great, all of the levels feel very different, and the level design is good. But playing through it 3 more times and then Team Chaotic's bullshit, yeah, the game just becomes an absolute slog, and even though I like most of the levels, I do have beef with some of them. I already brought up the pinball level, and Rail Canyon unfortunately isn't very good, but the other one I want to highlight is the Haunted Mansion. I fucking hate this level. As a kid, I wanted to rip my hair out every time I got to this level, and as an adult, yeah, this shit sucks, especially when you have to use the light speed dash, which is just kind of unreliable. But I've been going off about this game for well over 6 or 7 minutes at this point, so I'm going to wrap things up. Sonic Heroes is a good game. Sonic Heroes has a lot of aspects that are actually really great, but it's bogged down by the fact that you have to play through it 4 times if you want the real ending, and the controls being kind of all over the place. If you want the best experience, in my opinion, boot up the game, play through it as Team Sonic, and then just stop right there. I think the more you play this game, the worse and worse it gets, and the issues start piling up and becoming much more prevalent and annoying. Despite all of this, I still recommend the game, and listening to its music, I think anybody that likes 3D platformers will find something to enjoy with this one. And here we have Sonic Unleashed, which released in 2008. I actually remember getting this game day one. I was really excited for it, and all these years later, I think this is still a good game. I would argue it's even a bit overhated. I will also immediately bring up that there is 2 different versions of this game. There's the non-HD version for the PS2 and the Wii, that's the version I got as a kid, and then there's the HD version for the PS3 and 360. I have played through both, and for the sake of simplicity, I'm just putting them both here. If I split them up, honestly, it would just be back to back, since I think they are very close in quality. But there are actually a surprising number of differences between these 2 versions. But something they both share is the same story. So the story sees Sonic going up against Eggman, just like how it always is. Sonic becomes Super Sonic and supposedly beats Eggman, but it turns out it was all a trap. And Eggman harnesses Super Sonic's power to shoot a beam into the Earth, which breaks the Earth apart. And that releases this ancient evil creature known as Dark Gaia. And then Eggman, I guess, wants to take over whatever is left of the world. But Sonic, he isn't gonna have none of that. But he's not exactly himself. Thanks to the negative energy of the Chaos Emeralds, he becomes this werewolf dubbed the Werehog, which he naturally becomes at night. And it's up to him, along with this new character known as Chip, to stop Eggman and save the world. The story, yeah, I think it's actually pretty alright here. It certainly could have been a lot worse. I like Chip, and I think the dialogue is decent enough in both versions. I don't really got much to complain about here. When it comes to the core gameplay, it is split up between 2 completely different gameplay styles. There is Daytime Sonic and Nighttime Sonic. Daytime Sonic is very much modern Sonic gameplay. This is when they figured out how to make modern Sonic and actually make it fun as well, where you are going at supersonic speeds, blasting through these levels, collecting rings, taking out enemies, there's diverging paths, you get to drift, you get to grind, and you just feel so fast in this game. Like, the daytime stages of Sonic Unleashed are fantastic. They are exhilarating. No matter which version you're playing, I think the daytime levels are pretty awesome. These are some of the best levels of any modern Sonic game, and all these years later, I think it's pretty great stuff. And then we have Nighttime Sonic. During the nighttime, Sonic becomes the Werehog, and this is where the gameplay comes down to an absolute crawl. Instead of it being a 3D platformer where you move at supersonic speed, it becomes much more like a character action game. I'd say the best comparison is the older God of War titles, where it actually is like a hack and slash. You have a ton of different combos, abilities, and some really long arms. I don't think there's like a canon reason as to why he has these long ass arms either. If somebody knows, you can let me know down below, but it just kind of is what it is. In between all of the combat, you do some rather basic 3D platforming, but it's not anything special. I think the Werehog kind of gets a bad rap. Like, it's not terrible. The combat, it's decent enough. I've played terrible hack and slash games. I've played bad character action games. I wouldn't say this is bad. The controls are decent, the combat is okay, and it does get rather repetitive, at least towards the very end, but it's not unbelievably terrible like some people would lead you to believe. It's just this kind of gameplay really doesn't belong in a Sonic game. It kind of feels like they were more so cashing in on the popularity of character action games at the time instead of focusing on what would make this the best Sonic game it possibly could be. Still, I think the Werehog gameplay, it's alright. It's certainly nowhere near as good as the daytime gameplay, but I'm not going to act like it totally ruins this game. But I will say the balance between daytime and nighttime stages really does depend on the version you're playing of this game. It can be rather lopsided. The HD versions of this game have these hub areas that are just kind of obnoxious, and collecting medals is way more annoying in the HD version, but at least the game looks fantastic. Like, for the time, this was a great looking game. But good lordy lord, that frame rate, it is not so good. I always played the PS3 version and sometimes it just tanks, getting down to almost the single digits. But if you play the game on Series X, you can finally get a smooth frame rate. It took over 10 years, but damn it, we finally got it and it's glorious. But you know what's been bopping for 10 plus years? The soundtrack. Ooh, Sonic Unleashed soundtrack, it's really good stuff. All the daytime levels have excellent music, and I actually really like the slower jazz of the Werehog. Unfortunately, you don't hear most of the Werehog's music because once you get into combat, it plays the same combat theme over and over and over, and it certainly doesn't help with the repetition.
Art, I don't want to alarm you, but...
So in conclusion, I think Sonic Unleashed is a pretty good game. It absolutely does have some issues. I know the Werehog gameplay is not for everybody. The daytime medals can be a little annoying to collect and the frame rate can be rather sussy, but I still think this is a fun experience and I can recommend it. If you're going to play this game nowadays, I very much recommend the HD version. While the PS2 and Wii version are still good, I think the HD version is the better of the two, and I absolutely think it's worth playing if you like 3D platformers. Don't let this game's reputation stall you from playing it. Play the game, make your own opinion. I think it's a good one. And here we have Sonic Colors, which released initially for the Wii in 2010, but it was re-released in 2021. I remember being there day one with one of my best friends, being just really excited for the next Sonic game, and yeah, this one did not disappoint. So Sonic Colors takes place in outer space, and it sees Eggman building a giant amusement park to, quote, make up for his past transgressions. But Sonic and Tails aren't buying that shit, so they go to see what's up, and it turns out there's this alien race known as the Wisps, and yeah, they're gonna go up against Eggman. The story's simple, lighthearted, and fun, and that's all it really needs to be. I like the story of Sonic Colors, I think the dialogue's pretty good, and this game actually had me laughing plenty of times.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
This game's got a really great tone and atmosphere to it. It actually has some really great vibes. With most of the levels taking place in this amusement park, it just feels different from other Sonic games, and I mean that in a good way. When it comes to the gameplay, Sonic Team looked at Sonic Unleashed and went, you know, everybody really liked the daytime stages, what if we just made that the entire game? And there you have it, Sonic Colors. The game sees you moving at supersonic speed, blasting through these levels, boosting all over. You've got a really quick homing attack. Combat is almost non-existent. You're collecting rings. There's plenty of different paths in these levels. They're replayable. There's these hidden red coins throughout the levels, and it's just a really great time. Almost all of the levels really do have diverging paths, and they have set pieces and gimmicks to make them all feel relatively different and memorable from each other. Something else that they added to the gameplay was the Wisps, these little aliens that show up. Depending on the level and which color you get, they give Sonic special abilities, and these abilities only add even more to the game. They actually don't hinder the gameplay or hold it back or add unnecessary variety. I think these actually do add to the game, and they're pretty fun. Most of them are genuinely good fun to use, and they add even more to these levels. I love the themes, I love the variety, and the level design really is some of the best of modern Sonic. And there's even plenty of 2D platforming in here, and the 2D platforming, it really is just as good as the 3D platforming. The controls feel good, the momentum's great, and I think it's got a really good feel to it. At this point in time, it was really clear Sega actually had an understanding of what makes a good 3D Sonic game. Exhilarating gameplay, engaging level design, and they kept things rather lighthearted. The presentation for the time was excellent. This was a Wii game, and man, this is a good looking Wii game. The frame rate is also super smooth for the most part. The remaster definitely cleans the image up, but it really doesn't look all that much better than the original game. And the soundtrack, yeah, it's amazing. I love the soundtrack to Sonic Colors, and Aquatic Park really is one of the best tracks of any Sonic game, and the Sonic Symphony played it live in person in San Francisco for me, and it was one of the greatest moments of my entire life. The music's just really good in this game. If you're going to play this game nowadays, you're probably going to play the remastered version, which I know has its own set of issues, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter too much which version you're playing. This is an excellent game that I have no problem recommending to anyone that's ever even had an interest in Sonic, or if you like 3D platformers, then yeah, this game is totally worth checking out. And there's a reason it's one of the more well-regarded titles in the franchise. So here we got Sonic Frontiers, which released in 2022. I know really from the moment that this game was announced, there have been people debating and discussing whether or not it's any good, but I'm gonna just tell you that I was a big fan of this game. While it doesn't do everything perfectly, I think it's a great step in the right direction, and I thought it was a really enjoyable experience for the most part. When it comes to this game's setup, it sees Sonic, Tails, and Amy exploring these islands looking for the Chaos Emeralds. There's something going on with them, and they get sucked into this other world of sorts, and it becomes up to Sonic to rescue all of his friends. And of course, Eggman is behind it in some way. But that's all I'm going to say for the story. I actually really like the story of Frontiers. I think it's one of the best aspects of the game. The story is genuinely good. It's a bit more complicated than most Sonic stories, and it isn't super lighthearted, but I actually really like the direction they took here. The characters are actually a bit more mature, they're experienced, they reference older Sonic games, and I think they did a great job when it comes to the direction of these characters and the general dialogue. It's all good stuff, and there's actually some pretty interesting lore here also. Maybe I just enjoyed it more than most because I am a longtime Sonic fan and I was picking up all of these references, but I like this shit. When it comes to the gameplay, yep, it's certainly different from most 3D Sonic games. Not to sound too reductive, but imagine they took the boost gameplay of most modern Sonic games and kind of put it with like Breath of the Wild, dropping you into these rather large environments where you just kind of explore. You run around at high speeds, do plenty of platforming challenges, and get some collectibles, usually these medals. Enemies pop up here and there. There's actually quite a lot of boss fights in this game, and eventually you'll find yourself in the other dimension where you do a much more traditional linear Sonic level that is more of a throwback to older Sonic games, since it's quote Sonic's memories or something like that. When you're in the linear levels, it very much plays more akin to like Sonic Generations or Sonic Unleashed, and yeah, this gameplay is alright, but a majority of the gameplay really is the big open zones, and I think that's where the game is at its best. I feel that this game actually has a great sense of exploration. I had a lot of fun exploring every nook and cranny, zipping around this open world, looking for all the medals and gears, and just trying to see everything. I think Sonic's moveset actually works really well for a big open world like this. You can go really fast, and there might not be a spin dash, but I was really digging these platforming challenges. Yes, I even like the floating rails in the sky, which by the way, Sonic Heroes did like 20 years earlier. The grinding actually does feel really good in this game, maybe the best of any Sonic game, and that's saying something. Grinding's been around for like 25 years in the Sonic series. Something else that's been around forever in Sonic is combat. Usually it's pretty simple stuff, and here it's not all that complex, but it's actually enjoyable for the most part. Sonic does have a rather basic moveset, but most of the enemies die pretty quickly. There is a lot of boss fights in this game, and the boss fights, yeah, I'm a bit up and down on. Like, some of them are pretty cool. There's actually some really great set pieces, especially when you're Super Sonic, but some of these feel really spongy, and the combat is the opposite of challenging. This game might have the easiest parry of like any modern game I've played. Sekiro, this is absolutely not, but the combat still was enjoyable. It's usually over pretty fast, and as you play through the game, you actually get more ability. Sonic does become stronger, and the combat, it becomes better in my opinion. The pacing is actually pretty strong throughout. And I really love the sense of freedom they give you in this game. Like, if a medal's really giving you a tough time or you're having a hard time getting a gear, man, just go for a different one. You're not digging a cyberspace level? Forget about it. It's just like Mario Odyssey in that sense, where you only gotta collect whatever it is that you want to collect. You can have a very personalized playthrough, and I think it actually does really add to the replayability. Or you can just comb every single area and go for that 100%, which I low-key want to do, and that's because I genuinely enjoyed this game, way more than I initially thought I would. It's not all peaches though, I do have a few gripes with it. Like I mentioned, the cyberspace levels are probably the low point for the game. The 2D gameplay is just nowhere near as refined as the 3D gameplay. The combat can start to get a bit old, and the draw distance, yeah, it's not very good. I think this is a good looking game and the frame rate's really great, but the draw distance, it just kinda sucks. I will also concede and say that the open world can feel a bit lifeless at times. Thankfully, you got some kick-ass music in this game. The music does not disappoint. This game does not disappoint. While I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, I have no problem recommending this game to anybody that likes 3D platformers, or if you've ever had any interest in Sonic. I think most people are going to enjoy this one, and if you're somebody who's a longtime fan of Sonic and you haven't checked this one out, I don't know what you're waiting for. This game is tailor-made for you. And I really hope in the future that Sonic Team can stick to this formula and improve on it, because I think they really do have a winning formula here. So here we have a personal favorite of mine. We have the original Sonic Adventure. If you asked me what my personal favorite Sonic game of all time is, I would probably tell you Sonic Adventure. I have an immense amount of nostalgia for this game, and I still think it is really great. However, if we are talking about Sonic games worst to best, I would not say that Sonic Adventure is the very best game. It certainly has aged in many aspects, and it does have some less than desirable aspects to it. However, I still think it is one of the very best Sonic games of all time. So Sonic Adventure was the first fully realized 3D Sonic game. Yeah, there was Sonic 3D Blast, Sonic the Fighter, Sonic Jam, and a bunch of other weird sort of 3D games, but Sonic Adventure was the first real 3D game that actually made an impact. This really was the game that took Sonic to the third dimension, and it had a pretty epic story. They didn't just call it Sonic Adventure because it sounded cool. It really felt like an adventure. With easily the most complex story that any of the games had seen up until that point, it saw Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, Big the Cat, and E102 Gamma all going on their own personal adventures, and of course all of them converge and meet at the end for one big epic conclusion. I'll always love the story of Sonic Adventure. I think this shit's awesome. I like that it's a bit more complex than just Sonic fight Eggman. I love that all the other characters are here and that they're all in this big intertwined storyline that really does come together in the end, and I think the backstory and lore that this game introduced was not only incredibly fascinating for the time, but even nowadays. Like, I still want to know more about Chaos, the Chow, Tikal, and I've always just wanted more. More. Yeah, the game's got plenty of campy, goofy, silly moments that we look back and laugh on, but man, I just love the story for this game.
Watch out! You're gonna crash! Ah!
Well, I thought it was epic at least. When it comes to the gameplay, it certainly is interesting. This game introduces hub worlds, so it's not just level to level. You actually explore around these little hub areas and then go level to level. But in between the levels, yeah, you can explore the hub areas. I know not everybody likes these, but I enjoy the hub areas. They're very bite-sized, it's easy to get around them, and I never found myself lost or really annoyed with them. So yeah, you play as 6 different characters and all of them are pretty different from each other, so let's quickly run through them. Of course you have Sonic. He's the fastest character, and his gameplay sees him running through these levels at breakneck speed. He has the spin dash, he also has the light speed dash. You'll be using the homing attack and trying to really just get through these levels as fast as you can. There's a bunch of set pieces and memorable moments. Like, Sonic Adventure has some pretty memorable iconography, especially when you're playing as Sonic. He has the most levels and he has easily the best levels. I think the level design is actually very good for the Sonic stages. Then you have Tails. Tails is also pretty fast. He has a good sense of speed, and his levels consist of him usually racing Sonic to the finish. He can use his tails to fly, and it's pretty fun to play as Tails. It's not all that different from Sonic, and you go through almost all of Sonic's levels. Knuckles is where things really start to change. He can punch fools, he can glide, he can climb, and his levels are actually more like a treasure hunt, where you're looking for pieces of the Master Emerald, and I always found this fun. Yeah, it's just kind of a shitty radar, and you're just trying to get closer and closer to it, but I found it fun to explore around and look for all of the emerald pieces, and I really like Knuckles' moveset. Then we have Amy Rose. She's one of the slower characters and has her big ass hammer to help her. Her levels really consist of her being chased by this giant robot and you just trying to get away. Her levels aren't horrible, but they aren't exactly the most exciting. They're not Sonic's levels, I'll tell you that. Then we have Big the Cat, one of my favorite characters in the entire Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. His gameplay has never been seen before or again. It's actually fishing. Yeah, it's basically Sega bass fishing, where you gotta throw your rod into the water and you get to catch fish. You're looking for his pet frog, and your goal really is to just catch the frog. Of course you can go get the other fish, but if you go and get the frog, you can finish these levels pretty quick. Look, fishing games aren't exactly my forte, and when I was younger, I used to hate these levels, but nowadays, yeah, they're okay. They could have been a lot worse, I'll tell you that. They at least break up the action. Then we got E102 Gamma, who just blasts basically everything. His levels consist of you blasting as many things as possible. You actually are on a timer for every single level, and the only way to get more time is by blasting things. And I actually quite like playing as Gamma as well. I like playing as all of the characters, some clearly more than others, but I don't think there's a bad character here. I absolutely could see why some people don't like playing as Big or Amy, but I really see them as more of a minor annoyance than a huge issue. Something that I do think is a bit of an issue though is the controls. The controls haven't exactly aged all that well. they're pretty sensitive. Not like Sonic Heroes sensitive, but it takes a good while to get used to them, and they just haven't aged all that well. The game is full of areas actually that haven't aged all that well. Certain areas and levels, parts of the hub world, really all of Big's gameplay. But it's nothing to the point where I think the game is ruined or unplayable or anything like that. Something that I've always really appreciated about Sonic Adventure is just how much variety there is with this game, whether it's the boss fights, all the little fun mini games, or just how different all of the characters are from each other. The variety's always been really great. That and the Chow Garden is pretty awesome in the original Sonic Adventure. I think the pacing and level design of this game is also really good also. It's not just good for Sonic, I think it's good for really almost all of the characters, and all these years later, it's one of the better aspects to the game. But you know what else is a better aspect to this game? The presentation and the soundtrack. This game looked great back when it came out, and yeah, nowadays we probably laugh at how goofy this shit looks and how primitive some of the 3D might be, but I still think it is a good looking game. The DX version always looked a little shiny and weird, but I still think it does look good. The soundtrack though, oh my god, the soundtrack of Sonic Adventure. This shit is legendary. This is like an all-timer for me. It's fucking amazing. This might be peak Sonic soundtrack. Like, I just love the music in Sonic Adventure so much. There's a reason it's in so many of my videos. Could be here all day talking about the music of Sonic Adventure, but look how long this video is already. We don't need to make it even longer. I will just wrap things up and say that Sonic Adventure is not only one of my favorite video games of all time, but I believe that it is still one of the best Sonic games. I think for the most part, it's pretty playable nowadays, and I think there absolutely is merit in going back and trying it. If you like 3D platformers, if you like Sonic, and you maybe haven't tried this one, or you've ever been curious about Sonic, I think this is a great game to play. If they were ever going to remake a Sonic game, this is the one I really hope that they remake. But we'll see. Either way, this game is a certified classic. So here we got another certified classic. We have Sonic Adventure 2, initially releasing in 2001. While it initially released for the Dreamcast, it ended up on the GameCube just a year later, and really has gone on to be the most cherished, beloved non-Genesis Sonic game of them all. Like, people absolutely love Adventure 2, and it's not hard to see why. When it comes to this game's story, it's a big ol' epic adventure. There's actually two different stories to play through, the good and evil stories. The good side has Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles trying to save the world, while the evil side has Shadow, Eggman, and Rouge the Bat trying to conquer it. Despite the game's age, I'm not going to spoil anything because all these years later, this really is like the best story that Sonic the Hedgehog has ever had in a video game. It's just a really great tale. There's so many iconic, memorable moments in this storyline. There's so many lines that are just constantly living rent-free in my head all these years later.
So, how did you know it wasn't the real one?
Tails!
Because you just told me, Fox Boy. I'm the coolest.
This game introduced Rouge the Bat and arguably the most popular Sonic character that isn't Sonic himself, Shadow the Hedgehog, and all of his stuff is really great here. This was before everything got overly complex and, well, just kind of stupid. Like, the story, it's really great stuff here. There's a reason it's been low-key created a few times now. Like, it's just so incredibly memorable. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who are like, oh, the voice acting is trash, it hasn't aged well. This was a game from 2001. I think for 2001, it was pretty good, and it's decent enough nowadays. But you know what's more than decent enough? Actually playing the game. There's the two story modes, each with 3 playable characters, and all the characters play somewhat different from each other. You have Sonic and Shadow representing the speed stages, you have Tails and Eggman, who are in these big walker stages, and these are more similar to E102 Gamma's gameplay, and then we have Knuckles and Rouge, who have the treasure hunting gameplay from Sonic Adventure 1. I'll briefly go over each gameplay type. When you're playing as Sonic and Shadow, it is very much that 3D Sonic speed-based gameplay that you're very much looking for when you play a 3D Sonic the Hedgehog game. They move at incredibly high speed, they have the spin dash, the light speed dash. You'll be zipping through levels, hitting enemies with the homing attack, doing some platforming challenges, and really just trying to complete the level as fast as possible. Like most Sonic games, a lot of these levels do actually have alternate paths, and you can go about them in a few different ways. It's not as expansive as, say, the later, more modern 3D Sonic games, but there still is a few different paths here and there. And there's plenty of grinding here. It might take a second to get used to the grinding since it does feel a bit old school, but the grinding feels pretty good in this game. The controls in general are actually pretty good. Sonic isn't super sensitive, and neither him or Shadow are incredibly slippery. You're not going to fly all over the place. I feel like even nowadays the controls have actually aged pretty well, much better than Sonic Adventure 1. The levels you go through as Sonic and Shadow are some of the most unforgettable, memorable levels in all of Sonic's history. Neither Sonic or Shadow have a bad level in this game. They are all really great, and it's always a blast to go through these levels. This is easily the highlight of the game, and it's the gameplay style I come back to the most. Then we have Tails and Eggman's gameplay, the Walker gameplay. So yeah, this is more like E102 Gamma stages. There's no timer this time, but really you're just walking around blasting everything that moves. You can target multiple things at once and create these large combos, and I think it's totally fine to play as them. I know some people really don't like the Walker gameplay, but I've always found it enjoyable. There's a little bit of platforming, shooting everything is always going to be fun, and I think for the most part these levels are well made. I think it's better gameplay than E102 Gammas, that's for sure. And hey, outside of Mean Bean Machine, I'm pretty sure this is the first time you could actually play as Eggman, and you know what? It's actually fun to play as him. Then we have Knuckles and Rouge, the treasure hunters. You'll be looking for either pieces of the Master Emerald or some other plot related items, and it plays very similarly to Adventure 1, where it really is just you exploring these more open areas with a radar, and when you get closer and closer to the treasure, the radar goes off and becomes louder and brighter, and eventually you'll find all the pieces and you move on to the next level. You can glide around, you can climb things, and you generally get a good amount of freedom. I will say these levels are much bigger than anything Adventure 1 had. And to be completely honest, to keep things 100-100, I actually kind of prefer the levels of Adventure 1. I like that they were smaller. I like that the radar would tell you if you were near any of the treasure instead of just one at a time. And I think the levels were just a bit more fun to play. Not to say that Knuckles and Rouge have bad levels. I think all of their levels are pretty good. Outside of Mad Space, that level can just fuck off. I hated that level as a kid, and I hate it now. It's like the worst level in the entire game. The controls are all fucky thanks to the gravitational pull, and finding the treasure was just not an enjoyable experience. At least the music is pretty good in it. Speaking of the music in Sonic Adventure 2, oh, we could be here all day for the music of this game as well. It's fantastic. Like, every single level has a great theme to it. The game is just full of amazing music through and through, and I genuinely still find myself listening to the music even nowadays. Like, it's just kind of goated at this point. Sonic Adventure 2 really is low-key goated at this point. The game has some fantastic levels, it has variety with the 3 different gameplay types, it's got a good length to it, it's got decent pacing, the story's actually really great, the presentation for the time was very good, it controls well, and it's actually aged incredibly well. While I know that not everybody loves the different gameplay styles, I think they're all pretty good, and even at its very worst, you know, when you're playing Mad Space, I think the game is still an incredible experience. Like, it's got exhilarating, fun, varied gameplay, and it really is just one of the best 3D platformers of all time. And then we have the Chow Garden. The Chow Garden is just an amazing addition that has added so much replayability and playtime to this game, at least for me personally, that it's not even funny. I love raising these Chow, I love breeding them and trying to get different ones. The Chow Garden rules, and it really should have been its own game 20 years ago. The game also has a ton of replayability, trying to get the best rank, trying to get all of the emblems. There's multiplayer. The multiplayer is actually really good. There's a few mini games that show up here that are pretty fun. Like, all these years later, the game is still fantastic. I think it's a great experience, and I have no problem recommending it to anybody that likes video games. Even Sonic's most die-hard of haters, I think, can appreciate something about this game. And so here we got the latest 3D Sonic game. We have Sonic X Shadow Generations. So this game is essentially 2 games in one. It's a remaster of Sonic Generations, the 2011 3D platformer that celebrated Sonic's 20th anniversary, and then a brand new story mode known as Shadow Generations. And I gotta say, these two combined, yeah, I really do think this is like the best 3D Sonic game of them all. Sonic Generations by itself was already near the very top of the list, but adding in Shadow Generations, oh yeah, it's just not even close. Like, Shadow Generations is arguably better than Sonic Generations. They're both just excellent 3D platformers. So let's tackle one at a time. Let's start with Sonic Generations. So the game really was a celebration of Sonic the Hedgehog. It was his 20th anniversary, and the game is just a huge love letter to the entire series. When it comes to the storyline, it sees Sonic and all of his friends getting together for Sonic's birthday party when all of a sudden everyone's sucked into this portal by this weird new creature known as the Time Eater. This mysterious time-traveling entity, so Sonic's gotta defeat this guy, save all of his friends, and restore the world. But he's not alone. Thanks to all of the time-traveling shenanigans of the Time Eater, another Sonic the Hedgehog shows up, one from the past. This is classic Sonic from the good old Genesis days, and so the two of them team up to take on the Time Eater. I think the plot is good for what it is. I'm not gonna act like it's this complicated, complex, overarching narrative that has a lot of deep meaning or memorable characters and moments, because It really doesn't. It's just about celebrating Sonic's history in a relatively fun, lighthearted manner, and I think the game more than gets the point across. Look, you probably aren't playing this game for its story. You're playing it because you want to experience a bunch of classic Sonic levels again, and you love the blue blur. So let's actually talk about, playing the game. So there's two different gameplay styles here, classic and modern Sonic. We will start with classic Sonic since he came first, and when you play as him, it is strictly just a 2D platformer. You never go into the third dimension. You can do the spin dash, you can actually do the drop dash in this new remaster, and there's no homing attack. You gotta actually jump on the enemies just like the good old days, and you know what? He's got some pretty good 2D gameplay. I'm not gonna act like the 2D gameplay or the controls or feel are as good as Sonic Mania. It's not, but I think it is pretty good for the most part. It's aged very well, and while it might take a minute to get used to the physics, I think it is still very good, and it's really easy and fun to build up momentum in this game and, go fast. The levels are also pretty great as well, with tons of diverging paths and plenty of fan service. And then we have Modern Sonic. Modern Sonic plays much more like the modern 3D games, I know, shocker, where it sees you just blasting through these levels at blisteringly high speeds. You're boosting all over, you're doing these crazy jumps and tricks, there's grind rails all over the place, enemies get taken out with a simple homing attack. You're just trying to finish these levels as fast as possible. The 3D gameplay is really great, and sometimes the game goes to a 2D perspective, and I think this is pretty great also. At times, it's even better than classic Sonic's gameplay, and 3D Sonic, oh, these levels are so good. Let's actually talk about the levels. All of the levels are throwbacks to prior Sonic games, and I'll just be real, there's not a bad level here. They don't recreate these levels one for one. No, they're more like reimagining of these levels, and certain moments and elements from those earlier versions are here, but all of these levels are fresh, they're new, and they just are all fantastic. There's tons of diverging paths in literally every single stage. You're going to want to play through these stages multiple times. You can get a great sense of speed in them. There's the hidden red coins, and you're going to want to get S ranks on every single stage. Like, it's just so much fun to play through some of these levels, especially the 3D Sonic levels. Like, I just love a lot of these levels. These might be the best levels of any 3D Sonic game. It's just got such exhilarating, engaging, fun gameplay. And then the level themes they chose, I think they're all actually pretty good, with Green Hill from the original game, Chemical Plant from Sonic 2, Sky Sanctuary from Sonic and Knuckles, Speed Highway from Sonic Adventure, City Escape, because of course it had to be City Escape from Sonic Adventure 2, Seaside Hill from Sonic Heroes, Crisis City from everyone's favorite 06, Rooftop Run from Sonic Unleashed, and finally finishing things off with Planet Wisp. And then on top of that, there's a bunch of boss fights that are also throwbacks to prior Sonic games, and I think all of these are pretty great outside of the final boss. The final boss is just awful in Sonic Generations, but that's the exception, not the norm. I think all of the other fights are pretty good in this game. In addition to playing through all of the levels where you just go from point A to B, really just get to the goal ring, there's a bunch of other challenges that show up in the hub area, and you will actually have to do some of these in order to beat the game, but I think these challenges are a fun little distraction that adds some variety to the game and extend it out a little bit longer. And not in a bad way. The game absolutely does not overstay its welcome. In a first time playthrough, you can probably finish the game in around 4 to 5 hours, but man, it is a action-packed, exhilarating 4 to 5 hours. The pacing is really great in this game. It might be the best of like any Sonic game. I really just enjoyed playing through this game again, and this remaster, it seems to be pretty awesome. The presentation looked excellent for the time, the frame rate was great, it looks a little cleaned up here, and the music is just as good as ever. The music is really good in Sonic Generations. Funny enough, some of the voice acting and lines have also been updated with even more references to other Sonic games, and I gotta say, I really like some of these changes actually. All in all, if you're somebody who hasn't tried Sonic Generations at this point and you like 3D platformers or you like Sonic the Hedgehog, you really owe it to yourself to finally try this one. And then we have Shadow Generations. And ooh boy, I was really excited for this one, and it absolutely did deliver. If I split up Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations, man, Shadow Generations would still be near the top of the list. Like, this game is just awesome. So the game takes place parallel to Sonic Generations and focuses on Shadow, who is investigating the Ark for reasons, when all of a sudden the Time Eater shows up and starts messing with shit, and a bunch of Shadow's past really comes back to haunt him. Like, Black Doom actually comes back, Maria comes back, Gerald Robotnik comes back, and all I gotta say is the story is surprisingly really good. Not only is there a ton of fan service, but by bringing back Shadow's past and bringing up prior games, they're actually able to make some sense of the garbage nonsense that was the Shadow the Hedgehog video game. And shockingly, they actually turn it around and make a pretty good story out of it. Like, this game has a lot of really great moments, and if you're someone who's been a longtime fan of this series, especially Shadow, I think you're really going to love the story, and it got me even a little emotional towards the end. Like, it's just excellent. I don't know how much you're going to get out of this story if you're not a longtime Sonic fan, but as someone who is a diehard Sonic the Hedgehog fan, man, this is everything I could have always hoped for. Like, it was just so good. It was way better than I expected, and I wouldn't have imagined any of this shit happening even in my wildest dreams. Like, the fact that they even just reference the Shadow the Hedgehog video game speaks volumes. But then they actually build on it, they improve it, and they make some sense of it. It's like, wow, holy shit, this is awesome. And when it comes to the gameplay, oh, it's really great stuff also. The game is split up into two different sections, one of which being the more linear speed-based gameplay that's very similar to modern Sonic, and the other taking place in the open world that is the hub. Rather than it being a small little area like Sonic Generations, it's actually more akin to an open zone from Sonic Frontiers, and you can freely explore this area, go to the next level, but there's actually a bunch of collectibles, and you'll spend a good amount of time in this open area. And the gameplay in both of these is actually pretty great. I liked exploring the big open area. It reminded me of how awesome Sonic Frontiers was, and this is a well-designed area with plenty of fan service to Shadow the Hedgehog, and you can actually spend a few hours in here if you want to collect everything. It was a well-designed open area that I really never had any trouble exploring, and it only opens up and gets bigger and bigger the more you play through the game. But when you're not in the open areas, the hub, you're playing through one of the more linear speed stages, and this plays a lot more like modern Sonic, where you're boosting all over, you have the homing attack, and generally just going as fast as you possibly can. Shadow has a number of other abilities though, like Chaos Control. He can also shoot spears, he can surf on water, and they brought back all the punching and kicking from Sonic 06, only this time it's actually good and Shadow's a total badass. Like, you can whoop some serious ass as Shadow, way more than Sonic ever could, and he also feels great to control. It controls just like Frontiers and very well might be the best a character has ever controlled in a Sonic the Hedgehog game. It feels great, the momentum makes sense, it's not super sensitive or slippery, it's not stiff, it's easy to pick up and understand. Like, the controls are just fantastic. They even made the homing attack pretty reliable. It took like 20 plus years, but we're finally there. The homing attack is truly reliable in this game. But you won't even be using it as much because Shadow has so many awesome abilities. These levels are also pretty great, with plenty of diverging paths, good set pieces, memorable moments. None of these levels feel like they're on autopilot, and they all bring something different to the table. Each area actually has two levels, a 3D level, which are great, and a 2D level, and these are also pretty good. They're not as good as the 3D levels, but I enjoy them as well. There's also a bunch of challenges that you will actually have to do if you want to beat this game, and after you do them, you get to fight the bosses, and the bosses, oh yeah, they're all great stuff here. When it comes to the levels, there's really not a bad one here. Some of them are better than others, but I really enjoyed every single one of them, and there's some really great fan service in this game too. Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Heroes, Sonic 06, even Sonic Frontiers gets some love, which is pretty cool. But I will say it's a bit odd that Westopolis doesn't appear in this game at all. Like, Shadow the Hedgehog the game is obviously referenced several times. You go to Radical Highway and the Ark, which are both pretty similar to the game Shadow the Hedgehog, but come on. We played through Westopolis 10 fucking times already. Just give me more Westopolis. I want to see it recreated with the modern gameplay. I don't know what's good for me. What I'm trying to say is the level themes and levels themselves are all really great stuff. The game has a ton of amazing fan service, and it's just a fantastic 3D platformer through and through. This is the best game to ever feature Shadow, and it makes me really excited for the future. For years now, I've been wondering why we never got a Sonic Generations 2. Well, this is basically Sonic Generations 2, and it's just as great as I thought it would be. Sonic X Shadow Generations is the very best Sonic game to come out in quite some time, and I think it's one of the best Sonic games ever. If you've ever been on the fence about Sonic, or you're even kind of open to the idea of a 3D platformer, this game really is a must play. I loved every single minute of it, and I want to experience it over and over again. Some people might say recency bias, but my response is play it. Play through this and tell me that this isn't like the best 3D Sonic game of them all. Like, it was just so immensely enjoyable, especially as a diehard fan, and I could talk about this game all day, but man, this video is long enough as is. I've been going on for well over an hour here, and that's because I love this series and I love talking about Sonic, damn it. So that's it for today's video. Yeah, this was a really long one, but I love Sonic the Hedgehog. What can I say? I had a lot to say about these games. Let me know down below your favorite memory of Sonic the Hedgehog or some of these games. If you made it to this part of the video, you can comment our secret code word. Our code word today is going to be water. I need some water out here. I'm getting pretty thirsty. In fact, yeah, that's it for today. I'm gonna go get some water.